So how's it going?
It's going. I beat Final Fantasy Tactics Advance.
Nice.
I know. I understand that it's a long game in that there's like a million side missions and in content wise there's a lot there. And I've been intentionally, so it's very obvious what quests are mainline quests and which quests are like just like silly stupid things you do on the side. So I've been doing like
if you have to tutor someone.
Yeah. It's literally, it's like tutor me, or I lost my math homework, or like I need a new dress, or some of them are a little more legit than that. But anyway, I've been doing like literally like 10 silly side quests for every mainline quest. So I thought this is probably a pace that will, get me a good, maybe I'll kind of finish the game and have done most of everything. And so I was totally not expecting to just suddenly beat it. I had no idea I was so deep into the game. Although I noticed I had unlocked the whole map. So I kind of figured maybe I was, it could happen anytime. But yeah, it's just like kind of, I don't know, abrupt, I'll say.
Yeah, I remember the game overall just feeling kind of like, what?
Man.
Like, with every decision that they made and stuff, I felt like it could have been better. And like even at the ending, like it just seemed very anticlimactic.
Yes.
To me.
Yes, definitely. And I agree more and more, man. Seriously, like the laws, I think so. On paper, it's kind of I can see why it would be kind of a fun idea. Maybe like you could, it spices up the battles, right? It's almost like if you're playing, if there's no judge system and there's more of a legitimate, maybe story-based reason why something happens. Like you wandered into this land where magic doesn't work because of some, whatever stuff in the air, so you can't use magic in this particular battle or something. It's like, I can see how that, it's kind of interesting, a little twist. That battle will be interesting for that reason. But like, I found as the game went on, the laws get more and more strict, and there was more of them.
Yeah.
And it was just like I'd get in a fight with like 5 monsters. Like every person on the enemy team is a monster, and the rules would be like, don't damage monsters. It's like, don't damage monsters, don't heal your party, no status effects. I'm like, come on! I literally can't. It might as well just say don't fight. Like, what I had been doing every time I got one of those, like, don't damage monsters or don't do any damage, is I'd like put my whole team that's capable of casting poison. Because when you cast poison on someone, it doesn't hurt them when you cast it, but every subsequent turn it hurts them. So you could cast poison on everyone and not violate the laws, and then just run away and run into the corner while they like slowly get hurt every turn. But when, in addition to don't hurt anyone,
no status
effects. If you don't happen to have the law card that cancels the law, you just can't do anything. And there's like so many of these ridiculous, like, I don't know. And the worst law,
I feel like it's got to be just like some sort of a random system where it's pulling these things arbitrarily, and as opposed to a crafted thing where you're actually supposed to have a strategy.
Absolutely. And it's, I don't know, I didn't pay enough attention, but I think it's based on place. Because if you can't do anything and you shut the game off and then you restart it, and it's one of those missions where like it's a fight where the guy moves around on the map, so you could do the fight with against the same people but in a different place. If you meet them in the same location, it's the same set of laws, but if you go somewhere else, it's different laws. So I think it's locked down to the locations.
I wonder if it's like a random seed that's based on location or something. Maybe.
I'll one last note on this game is the worst law in the whole game. The worst by far, in my opinion, is I don't know. I have the Japanese game. I don't know what it is called in English, but it's like no copying the previous person. Do you remember that law? So like if someone
if like one person attacks, you're not allowed to attack.
Correct. You have to wait. Like it would have to be another turn past that next person before you could attack. The problem with all the laws, this one particularly, is that you forget them. Like when there's 3 laws and it's like, don't do that, and no like doing more than this much damage, and no whatever, and you have them in your mind kind of, you kind of forget what the last guy did, and so you attack, and there you violated the law. And the penalties, sometimes it's like, take 2,000 money, right? And it's like, okay, I have like so much money, it doesn't matter. And sometimes it's like, reduce your character's level. I mean, come on, that's hugely different. Or like one of them is like when you win battles, you get AP points, right? One of them is like steal entire team's AP points. I mean, come on. Sometimes I like accidentally use a potion, and I forgot that there's some stupid law like don't do anything that ends in the letter N. That's actually a law. And so my character just has nothing to do and is full power, and I just think, well, if I use a potion, I'll get experience. Use the potion. You violated the law. At the end of the battle, he takes all my AP. I started resetting the game more and more and more. So anyway, I'm done griping. I'm done the game. Overall, the law thing was awful. There was a lot of weird things in it. I would say I did enjoy it, though, I guess, despite everything. Yeah.
Is there anything from the game in particular that you would take away and use as a mechanic in a game you were making?
If you asked me that about the original Final Fantasy Tactics, I'd say a few things. In this one, it's just the original with new mechanics that don't work, right? I think the world agrees with me there. Yeah,
that's what I don't get is there's so many people on Reddit and stuff that just claim that this is their favorite game of all time, and it's like I don't see it. I want it to appreciate it. Obviously, I bought it, and I don't know. I feel like there were a few games in a row there that kind of made me disenfranchised with Final Fantasy.
Oh, really?
There was the Final Fantasy 12 Revenant Wings as well, which is like a weird real-time strategy style game, I guess, on the DS, and I absolutely hated that, and I didn't care for this one. I hated Final Fantasy 8 and 10.
Oh, you hated 10?
Yeah, I didn't like it at all.
What about X2?
I didn't even try it.
Oh man, that one left a bitter taste for me.
Yeah, that was the thing, right? Is like when I saw that this was the direction that they wanted to move in, where they're like making sequels to that. I bought Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus as well.
Yeah,
Cerberus. I don't know how you want to pronounce it.
That one and the Revenant Wings. Those are the two. Like they made that little spin-off trilogy kind of around the story of Final Fantasy VII. Is that where they?
Well, Revenant Wings is part of Final Fantasy 12.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
But yeah, it's like they really watered down the franchise, making all these sequels and stuff, and then like they went. Final Fantasy 11 was an online only game, and Final Fantasy 13 just like I was busy when that came out, but it got such abysmal reviews that it was just like, okay,
Is that the one with lightning?
Finding it hard to care. Yeah.
Yeah, there was that.
And then 14 was online. It was like
subscription. Yeah, I that was a huge down period for me as well. I totally checked out from 11 till 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. I remember trying 12, and I liked that.
A lot of people did. Yeah.
It was kind of the same world as the Tactics and Tactics Advance, taking place in Evilus.
Yeah.
And it had judges and stuff, but they didn't use any of the completely broken mechanics of judges.
Right.
It was just like, it was like just a class of soldier or something that was in the Empire or something.
That's really funny, actually. I knew that it was Evilus or however you say it, but
yeah,
I didn't know that. I actually kind of can't believe that they put the judges in. That's really funny.
They just don't play the same role at all. It's like calling someone a samurai or something.
Yeah, I see. It's still funny. It's a call out to like a terrible mistake in a different game.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I don't know. Anyway, enough about Final Fantasy Tactics and Advance and sort of. I mean, what we kind of wanted to talk about today was the idea of pre-rendered backgrounds.
And I think
which actually ties in quite a bit with Final Fantasy
because they were you have your prime example of a pre-rendered background in number 7 and of course beyond, but I think 7 was
7,
the
8,
one.
9.
Yeah. I think the whole PlayStation era had a lot of exemplary games for if you're a fan of pre-rendered backgrounds.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's just because we grew up with Nintendo and Sega Genesis and stuff, but I really loved the idea of these like crafted 2D experiences.
Right.
I was never bothered by the fact that like you couldn't rotate around stuff. Like maybe I don't know. Like I was gonna say like maybe the fact that it made it harder to find secrets and stuff. But even then, like the idea of the original Final Fantasy IV games and Shining Force games and stuff, where like every now and then you could like walk through little invisible tunnels in the walls and stuff to find treasure chests, like that I always thought that was like super appealing.
I mean, well, I guess kind of, it's an entirely different approach if they design the level such that like rotating it in a certain way suddenly makes it visible, I think, right? Like that's, I mean, you're going to it's more likely to notice things than to find it through exploration. So I think it's almost a different mechanic in a way, I guess. Yeah. I kind of, I mean, it's a nostalgic period for me, like the PlayStation era. And so when I think of pre-rendered backgrounds, I mean, I don't know, do you see that a lot nowadays? I really think back to that era.
There's very few. Like I've played a couple of indie games that are like that.
Yeah.
Like I think I played Bastion recently, which was all pre-rendered and looked nice. But yeah, I don't know. That I guess that's part of what was turning me off around the Final Fantasy X era as well. Is just this move into complete 3D. Like I think 10. The cameras were still kind of locked down and followed you, like you couldn't rotate stuff. I don't remember being able to rotate stuff, but they were like 3D environments. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pre-rendered backgrounds really appealed to me as well. For me, if I was to use like a 3D background, I don't know. I feel like if it was a game that had a lot of like randomized stuff, or like, you know, procedurally generated levels or something, it'd be kind of cool if it was like more maybe like grid based, and then they might as well just make it 3D at that point. But what you're describing kind of with the crafted experience approach, which I think generally works better, it seemed like a great approach to me, just almost in an artistic sense. Like if you play games like Chrono Cross, or obviously Final Fantasy VII is the big example, I think it looked really well. I think it worked really well, and I also think, especially at the time, I mean, 3D was kind of still a young technology, at least from my only raised on console games kind of point of view. And it just was so, I mean, look at, say, the original Metal Gear Solid. I mean, I very much love that game, actually, but, you know, I wouldn't call it a pretty game.
No.
Compared to especially
they remade it on the GameCube.
I know, yeah. What's it called? Snake Eater?
Twin Snakes, I think.
Twin Snakes, and Snake Eater is a later,
Yeah, that was Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even just once it moved into PlayStation 2, the graphics seemed a little bit more manageable.
Palpable.
Palatable.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess that's part of what got me thinking about these in the first place. Is back at the end of December, I was playing Parasite Eve for the first time, and so yeah, that's was released back at the same time as the Final Fantasy VII, 8, and I just never gave it a shot at the time because Square Enix was or I guess it was SquareSoft at the time or actually no, I think that was Square EA.
Oh God,
they've gone through too many variations. But yeah, I think Parasite Eve was Square EA, and that was at the same time as like Final Fantasy VIII and all these other big hits. And just, you know, you're like a 13 or 14-year-old, like you've only got so much money to invest into trying games at the time. There's just so many home runs being hit.
It's funny now that when you say that. It's like now our big bottleneck is time. Back then it was money.
Yeah.
You just, you know, never works out for us.
Yeah. That's what retirement will be for, hopefully.
Yeah.
Except by then I'll have built up such an immense backlog that I still won't.
You just won't feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it'll be health or something. You'll have terrible arthritis and playing games won't be enjoyable.
Yeah. Cataracts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the one thing that I will say about Parasite Eve, there were a lot of spots in that where I remember like exploring like in a subway tunnel, for example, and you go inside a train car, and there's like treasure chests and stuff that you can find, and they're just so difficult to even pick out from the environment because it's like this painted thing that just fits in everywhere.
Right.
So I remember them trying to fix that in like Final Fantasy 9 maybe, where they had like little triangles over top of every single treasure chest so that it was harder to miss them.
Right. I think 7 had something similar. Let me remember.
Yeah,
you could hit select and it would like put little arrows above all the exits and stuff.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, and there would be like little bags and stuff that would like glow every now and then or something.
Exactly. The treasure chests and like the little bags or little special items would kind of shimmer a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 was, I mean, I don't know. You had to forgive them a little bit because I think it was their first foray into like this kind of game, but the characters, like at least as much as I hate 8, I didn't feel like the characters were out of place, whereas 7 it was like you had these sometimes but sometimes beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds, and then you had like these like glowing,
super chunky,
super chunky polygon, like totally like wacko color characters that don't look properly lit at all, just wandering around with, I don't know. It was growing pains maybe, but they as they worked with it, they definitely got a little better at that. 8 being just an example. I never played Parasite Eve, so I.
It's actually really solid.
Yeah, I remember at the time, and I remember it being popular, and I think I even remember commercials back when I actually watched TV and saw video game commercials. And I don't know, like you, it was just yet another game in that similar vein from Squaresoft even. I feel like that era, they were just churning out things, and I just didn't get to it.
Yeah, I don't know how many action RPGs existed up until that point. I imagine there was a bunch in the Western world, but as far as JRPGs, I think that was a pretty new thing at the time, and it I don't know, it feels good. Like it feels largely like a Final Fantasy game, but then it's got like these little actiony moments, like you can dodge attacks by physically moving your character around on the screen. And,
cool.
And I haven't played very many games that take place in like a modern time period, and it's refreshing, I think, when I do play something like that. Like it takes place in New York City, and I think it took place in the current year of like 1999 or something. You're using weapons, and you're using guns and nightsticks and bulletproof vests and stuff is your armor. So I don't know. I feel like there were. I can't even remember what exactly the gripes were. Like I remember that there was something about it that did feel a little bit dated, but otherwise, like I was playing it on my PSP, and so the hand painted backgrounds and stuff, while they may not have looked too nice on like a 50-inch TV, they looked fantastic on this little PSP screen in front of me.
Awesome.
So I feel like it holds up really well and is still a really good game to play.
Cool. I can relate a slightly less positive anecdote about a game with a pre-rendered background being ported. I don't know if you've ever played the Final Fantasy VII computer port, have you?
No.
It came out maybe, I don't even know, like literally like 2 years after Final Fantasy VII. I don't know, but PlayStation, the resolution was surprisingly low. I think it was like, it might have even been the same as the Super Nintendo, just in terms of pixels. Obviously, it looked better. There was more colors. They had the 3D thing going on, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't have the weird sprite limitations. And you just playing it, you'd think it wasn't like that, but I'm pretty sure it had at least comparable. It wasn't like suddenly 1080p or whatever, right? I mean, this thing came out in 1994.
I just looked it up, and I think it's 240p.
Yeah, so I mean, very, if not the same as Super Nintendo, very comparable. But the PC port, I mean, even PCs at the time were like, I think, standard 480 by 640 monitors. And so what they did is they like cleaned up everything they could with like anything that was 3D. So like the characters looked super high res. The battles were super high res and looked a lot prettier than they did on PlayStation. But the problem is, of course, the pre-rendered backgrounds were pre-rendered backgrounds, so they didn't do anything there, which is, I agree, the right thing to do. But it was just so awkward having this super high res block man walking around on like what looked like an old game screen, kind of, right?
Yeah.
It was jarring, and I guess that's one of the things about like if you were to port forward a 3D game, you could probably it'd be a lot of work, of course, but you'd redo all of the textures and whatnot, and then you just have a higher res game, right? Whereas a pre-rendered background, unless they've saved the original artworks physically somewhere, if all you have is that pixelated image,
rescan them, right?
Yeah, you're kind of out of luck. You have to redo it, and maybe you could redo it and have it look very much like the original. I don't know, but I guess for this particular port, the obvious answer in their mind was just to take the raw data and just dump it in this new game, and it really didn't work very well. So,
yeah,
I guess moving to you said you played it on PSP.
Yeah,
I don't even know what the resolution is, but maybe there was no issue there.
I mean, I think a PSP res is still higher than original PlayStation. PSP resolution. So I think it's actually it's about the same size, but it's widescreen. So
so how did they handle that?
I'm pretty sure it was just with the pillar boxing, the black bars on the side.
I see.
So yeah,
sure.
you're looking at it at its original resolution on a screen that's a lot smaller. So you're seeing much better pixels per inch, I guess.
Yeah.
So probably it actually looked better than the original version.
Almost certainly, by the sounds of it. It's like playing Chrono Trigger on the DS or something. It's like did this game look this good? And then you realize it's like the pixels are so minuscule that it didn't. Yeah.
It's so I don't know. I miss that though. Like one set of art books that I've got, like I didn't end up picking up the art book back in college. Someone had shared a whole bunch of the concept art from Final Fantasy XI. So I don't know where exactly that came from, but I ended up eventually finding a book called Kusanagi, which I think is a design studio, but they've published a few different books. So I picked up Kusanagi IV, which has a bunch of the original drawings from Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, and like Bouncer and a couple other games.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love like the art style in those, like being able to go back and look at these illustrations, and it's kind of unfortunate that it's only the line art for the majority of them, but still, these are the exact environments that made it into the game.
I know. I think that's awesome. Honestly, static imagery in games in general. I mean, I like you can appreciate like cool illustration and stuff, and so when that is the game, it's not just like some concept art that they turn into like a 3D model and then that it doesn't port over. I think that's very cool. Even like. I feel like we go back to Final Fantasy constantly. I'm not trying to, but I have like the Final Fantasy, what's it called? 25th Memorial Ultimania.
Right.
Whatever. But it's just like, I think you've seen the book or have the same book. It just has like basically artifacts from the development of those first 6 Final Fantasy games. And like they have pages after pages of the monster art. And you look at it and it's just illustration. It looks awesome. And you realize that is what went in the final game for the monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, obviously they got pixelated and probably changed around or whatever, but it's as is, you know what I mean? It's not just like a concept art. It's like that image got pixelated into the final one. It's very cool to have that. So obviously as games, the graphical capabilities increased up to, say, the PlayStation era, where it was probably, they could basically do that and make a pre-rendered background. I mean, it's just an extension of that same cool idea, I guess, to me. And again, I like you. I think it what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like it remains as a piece of art in the game, if that makes sense. Like obviously a 3D background is art as well and so forth, but like it's I don't know, it tended to be less of a crafted thing. So it's a different approach to a visual environment, obviously, but
well, I mean I feel like stuff like like if you look at any of the shops and stuff that are in Final Fantasy VII, for example, like each one of those layouts is a completely unique illustration, right?
Yep.
Like they didn't it's not the same as the older Final Fantasies where you've got a tile set that you use to populate your environment, and that's exactly what we do with modern games too. Like when we were working on Gears of War, like, you know, every time there's a barrel in your environment, it's not a unique barrel. Like there's maybe six different models of barrels that get repopulated around, and there might be a little bit of procedural stuff going in the shader, but you know, it's an identical barrel every single time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you're totally losing that by getting into this asset type mindset where you're quickly populating levels instead of like crafting each thing into a unique art scene.
Yeah, no, I get you totally. And I think another thing that's interesting is that if you think of it almost like, say, again, going back to kind of how they make films, the viewer in a film doesn't control the camera angles, right? Which, again, for better or for worse, right? If they could, it might be a much more interesting experience in some ways. But since that is something that's static and the filmmaker has chosen what to do in each scene, they can craft an experience with that, right? Like certain times, like there might be a scene in the film where like the angle is such because, you know, maybe it's supposed to be ominous or menacing, or maybe it's supposed to be pleasant, or maybe you're supposed to have a feeling like something is very large, so it's kind of a worm's eye view to something and so forth. And I found, obviously, with like the pre-rendered background games of the PlayStation era, they use that somewhat, right? You'd be like in some frantic chase, so they'd have like kind of a close-up and everything's like flying past you really quick as you run by, or it'd be like you're supposed to be in this vast city, so the scene would be like you moving kind of depth-wise into the TV, if you will, and you can move until your character disappears as a tiny little thing way in the background. So just that's lost as well, right? I find. And like even
like that whole idea of like an establishing shot and stuff.
Exactly.
I don't notice that very often where they change the scale. Like it's typically now you're playing stuff like Skyrim where it's a first person, or you know, you can wheel the mouse out a little bit and it's a third person, but you're still within just a few feet of your character.
Yep.
So.
Yep, definitely. Another point for me I find interesting. Of course, there's no. This maybe says less about pre-rendered backgrounds versus 3D generated backgrounds or whatever, and even maybe just more about I don't know, trends in general. But I've found as they've gotten to like, I mean, right now obviously hyperrealism is popular, and almost everything is like many major titles are 3D or first person or whatever. There's just a tendency for everything to kind of look a little blah to me. You know, some games are just beautiful, but still, it's just hyperrealism, and it's impressive, but it's not like, I guess, artistically interesting to me. There's either a trend to take less of an artistic approach, or maybe it is just simply more difficult in some way to do that with a 3D game. But like an example I'll throw out, whether you like the series or not, I know like it feels like everyone hates it, but have you ever played Saga Frontier 2?
I played whatever Saga Frontier was on the PlayStation.
That's the one everyone hated. So 1 and 2 were both on the PlayStation, and everyone played 1 and hated it, and then that was it. The series just went away in the West. But Saga Frontier 2, which was a vastly superior game to the first one, it was like all the backgrounds were like this really cool watercolor kind of background, and your character. Do you remember it?
I remember liking the backgrounds of Saga Frontier. Like that was a large part of the reason why I wanted to try it. Was I remember the artwork being very nice, but the way the game played itself,
definitely not your kind of game. Going back to last week's, flavor versus mechanics. I actually appreciated it. I mean, Saga in Japan is a series, right? There's like Saga 1, 2, 3, and then Romancing Saga.
Was that the Final Fantasy Legends on the Game Boy was actually Saga, wasn't it?
Yes, I think yes, that's correct. Yes. So I didn't enjoy the original Saga. Actually, that's not true. Saga 1 was bad. 2 was a lot of fun.
2. That was the one with the crystals and the different worlds.
Yeah, 2 was a lot of fun, and 3 was really fun. 1 was weirdly bad, but 2 and 3 were a lot of fun. Yeah. So and then Saga Romancing Saga on Super Nintendo. There was 3 games there. Those were really cool. They were weird kind of, and they had a weird aesthetic. But anyway, Saga Frontier was definitely like the black sheep of the series, and it was the first one that was officially released as a Saga game in the West. So everyone hated it. But Anyway, number 2 was, like I said, it was like kind of watercolory backgrounds, and it was very cool. And I think they could do that with a pre-rendered background, because you paint this very aesthetically pleasing watercolor image, and then you have the characters. They weren't like polygons walking on top of it. They themselves were like, sprites.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now.
Yeah, built to match that background, and it was a lot of fun. I thought it worked out really, really well, and I haven't really seen a lot of examples of that, particularly with anything 3D of any sort.
Yeah, I would love to make a game that kind of looks like this. So the two things that come to mind looking at this artwork right now is when they remade Final Fantasy Tactics for the PSP and the iPhone, I believe. It's called War of the Lions now.
Yeah.
They threw in a bunch of cutscenes that were obviously not in the original, and they tried to make those all look very much like illustrations.
Okay. Cool.
I thought that was a really cool thing to do, but my problem is I have yet to see a 3D production attempt to look like 2D and really nail it. Like, I don't know. I've never been able to get into cell shaded style stuff, and I know.
Yeah, that was the closest thing I could think of. No, I wasn't continuing. I was just gonna say, like, I that's for me as well. Like, what was it? I'm trying to remember. Ni no Kuni, was that cell shaded?
Yeah, that was the second one that I was just about to mention.
Okay, I won't steal your thunder. Unless I just did.
No, I mean, that was the point that I was going to make, is like, it was kind of a unique style. The same with Wind Waker, where they went in this clearly cartoony type style.
Wind Waker, right. Well,
I would much rather see this stuff be actual 2D hand-painted stuff. Like, you lose so much of that texture of like brush strokes and stuff. And
absolutely agree.
Those decisions of where are they going to ink a line or make it thicker or thinner and stuff. Like, anytime they try to procedurally just let the computer figure it out, I think it inevitably feels less good.
Less crafted, but it isn't crafted anymore, right? Have you played Have you played Okami?
No.
It's kind of, I don't know if it I mean, you might have the same issues with it, but I think it's almost like, I guess to me, as good as that's going to get. It feels like they really did take crafted 2D kind of imagery and just plaster it on the 3D in a way that feels good, I guess. I mean, they're going for that kind of very stylized, like you're talking about, where like the line widths matter and kind of all that stuff. And so like a lot of the effects he uses when it's like, it's obviously just like a 2D overlay that and then the world is 3D, but it's kind of built in a way that supports those little bursts of kind of 2D, I guess, crafted backgrounds, if you will, and crafted effects. I don't know. I like the game a lot. I wouldn't say it's a failure in any sense, like its art style. It might not perfectly achieve what you're describing, but I thought it was pushing in that direction. Yeah, now that I hadn't actually even thought of that game before we talked here. So
I guess that's like, from an aesthetic point of view, we're both totally in favor of the handcrafted artwork style. Yeah. But how do you feel mechanically? Like, I guess we were talking about like how you can kind of treat it with a cinematic eye by like setting the camera wherever you want when you're doing 2D stuff. But how do you feel about this transition into stuff like Kingdom Hearts, for example, where, you know, it's an action game and it's maybe a little bit less about finding hidden treasure chests and more about like just hammering on the action button to take out stuff. Like, do you think that sort of thing would work as well in 2D, or would it just be like more like those side-scrolling beat-em-up games where?
Interesting question. I had not considered. You know, I think not enough people have tried. Now, I say that as someone who doesn't really, unfortunately, have the wealth of experience playing newer games. Maybe so, but I don't know. I haven't necessarily seen it done too well. I like that, like you had mentioned indie games earlier, and that there's like a lot more indie games now doing kind of the pre-rendered thing. I feel like at least exploration is happening there, and so maybe I should actually just get out and play a lot more of those games and see it happen, because I feel like from what I've seen just with like pre-rendered backgrounds, there's a consistent kind of game that emerges there. and I haven't seen maybe enough kind of playing with that style to make different types of games. So yeah, I might not have enough insight to have a good answer. I think it'd be fun though to play with that more.
I feel like certainly from the developer's point of view, it makes way more sense to make stuff out of 3D assets, because it's like
definitely, yeah, of course.
Like all the fakery that has to go into making collisions happen with stuff that's just a 2D painting in a 3D space seems like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like I remember we were trying to do that when we were working on Super Hematoma. Like I made like this little platform in the middle of like a water area. Like I was expecting to be able to fully walk around and then jump on top of and walk under it and stuff. And it's like, when you're painting it, it's no problem at all to just make something that looks like that. But it seems like you had to go through a hell of a lot more effort to make that actually happen.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think, so our approach was kind of weird too, right? Like we didn't take say if we had like kind of built out like an editor or something, or not even necessarily an editor, but just like a tool set that worked better. Whereas I was kind of trying to spin something up from scratch as we went along, I guess. So there was a lot of, I guess, process issues that made that difficult at the time. But I don't know. I even there, I don't have a lot of insight, to be honest. I feel like that could have been done. I don't know. I almost feel like it's less of a technical issue maybe and more of a design issue in many cases, right? Like we've all played a game where it's like you can't tell what you can jump on or what you can do, right? I feel like I've seen that a lot less in 3D games. Like your character, if it's a first-person game, you look around, you see stuff, you can tell what's solid and what you can kind of generally tell the bounds of where you're supposed to be able to go, maybe more easily, especially like where I've seen a lot of 2D games fail at like kind of simulated depth, if you will. I've seen games do it well, like in my opinion, say the Super Nintendo Zelda, where there really isn't actually any depth, but as a player, you feel like you're jumping off the little ledges and stuff. And then I've just seen it fail where like I had no idea I could get to this other area. I thought it was part of the background or something.
I've always found it. I guess it all depends on the cameras. I hate trying to navigate around in first person games. Like when they made the Metroid Prime games, I absolutely hate those. Because Metroid to me is a platforming style game. Like you've part of the fun is getting up onto ledges and stuff, and I hate trying to like look at the ledge that I'm trying to get onto while judging where my feet are that I can't see at all.
Right.
And so for that reason, like I totally prefer the 2D games because like you can tell exactly where you are and where you're going.
Yeah. I feel that. I see that. It's almost, I mean, you throw out Metroid Prime as an example, even like early, like, I don't know about Doom 1, but even maybe like Quake, if you played any of the Quake games, like they really felt like that. It was a lot of platforming, and it was interesting, I guess, because it was new, right? Like I'd played a million 2D platformers, and here's a 3D platformer. But it's certainly, I feel you. It's like less control kind of, and I think it's intentional, right? It's like more like in real life where you have to look around and you don't have like vision, you can't see behind you essentially, right? But I know you haven't played it, but Guild Wars 2 I think actually handled that sort of stuff pretty well. Like one of the things in that game was they had jump puzzles. So like on any given map, there'd be like all these quests and stuff you could do, but generally there was at least one or two jump puzzles, which it was just a part of the map that you had no reason to get to whatsoever. But if you were exploring and just enjoying the artwork and stuff, you could get to this, and then all of a sudden there's like this big platforming section that you have to like try to get onto, and because it's a third person game and you get to rotate the camera around, like it's kind of the same way where you can see exactly where you're standing and where you're trying to get to and stuff. And I think that was probably my favorite part of that game was just the little jump puzzles that were of absolutely no consequence. Awesome. Yeah. Like like you said, I haven't played it, so I don't have insight. That wasn't pre-rendered backgrounds, was it?
No, those were all 3D environments, and so every now and then you'd be trying to do one of these puzzles, and it would kind of fall apart because there was just no possible way that you could get the camera positioned in a comfortable spot or something. But,
right. Classic issues.
Yeah.
It was. I always found it. I mean, going back to kind of what you were saying about Metroid Prime a little bit, I found it jarring almost when like a lot of these 2D game franchises went to 3D because.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe this goes again back to like.
I wish they had just made a new franchise.
Exactly. But that's why I almost feel like maybe this goes back to again whether you're focused on kind of the mechanics of the game or the flavor of the game. From a flavor sense, sure, right? It's the same characters. Mario's now in 3D, Link's now in 3D, whatever. But for me, it just felt like a different game, like entirely, right? Like even say Mario 64. I really, really enjoyed the game.
Hated that.
Oh, you hated it?
Well, I it was a fun game, but I absolutely hated the camera.
So I don't know if you played. I assume you played a lot of games from that era. I thought, you could take 10 kind of third-person guy running around on the screen games, and it had the best camera of them. I thought it was not perfect. I was frustrated at times, but other than say Metal Gear Solid, I thought did pretty well with the camera, but that's because they locked it in place, and the game allowed for that, right? Yeah. Whereas Mario 64 went for kind of like this fluid, go anywhere, do anything. I agree it wasn't perfect. I agree. But like there's so many games at the time that I just was ripping my hair out and throwing the controllers. Did you play Goemon, or what's it called? Mystical Ninja on Nintendo 64? No. Yeah, it was like Mario 64 with a broken camera. Just like beyond broken, I'll say, since you already consider the real one broken. Tail Concerto. I really like that game, but again, broken camera. I think it was like game companies just getting used to this new paradigm for them.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, computers were expensive back then. Like doing these 3D games was hard.
You had like the Silicon Graphics workstation or whatever.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
For $30K.
What's interesting? I guess we should kind of wrap up because we're getting on 40 minutes or so. But what was interesting is I just finished reading the Console Wars book.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember if I mentioned that at all on the podcast yet, but
I knew you were reading it, so I don't know if it was podcast or outside of the podcast. But anyway,
but yeah, that was on sale in January for like $2. So I picked that up and read through it, and I think it's one of the better books I've read. Period. It's kind of written in this like fictional. Like storytelling way where you know that none of the conversations and stuff could be quotes, but it gives you some really good insight as to what was going on with the rise and fall of Sega, and consequently the fall and rise of Nintendo.
Right.
And the reason I'm kind of thinking about this is just because of the mention of the Silicon Graphics and the Mario 64. And one thing that I found incredibly interesting that I didn't know about was, if you remember the whole snafu, for lack of a better word, between Nintendo and Sony, where Nintendo kind of like screwed Sony.
Left them hanging, yeah.
Yeah. They like had this plan, and then they went with someone else and like didn't tell Sony until they were at a big event like E3 basically, and they just like publicly announced that they were with this other company after Sony had already announced the stuff that they were doing with Nintendo.
Brutal, yeah.
So anyway, like after that,
Philips was the other company, I believe. Anyway,
yeah.
Which was apparently at the time a bigger smack in the face, because there was kind of this, Japanese companies work together idea. So for them to drop Sony and go with, I think Philips is German or something, to like go with this Western company was like, anyway, continue.
Well, so from that point on, like I had always just assumed that Sony went directly on their own after that to make the PlayStation. There was actually a period of time where they were in talks with Sega. That's
crazy. Are you serious? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so after Nintendo screwed them, they started talking with Sega, or Sega of America specifically, and they were like really close to making the Sega CD equivalent.
Wow.
But Sega of Japan just seemed like it was the most juvenile company ever where they just like didn't want to use any sort of method that America was succeeding with. Like they just wanted to do things their own way, and so they were like, no, we don't want anything to do with Sony. It doesn't fit with what we want. It's not going to work. And America was like, well, why isn't it going to work? And they're like, end of discussion. So the same thing happened again. Like once the CEO at America was like, okay, well, the Sega thing or the Sony thing fell through. I'm gonna come up with something that absolutely will win 100%. There's no way Japan can turn this down. And they were in talks with Silicon Graphics. And
really?
So they started having a relationship, and because Silicon Graphics was like, we've got this new chip that we've been working with in Jurassic Park and stuff. It's the cheapest thing on the market. It's the best thing on the market. Let's work together. And Sega of America's like, awesome, let's do this. And they worked together for a little while, and then they brought it to Sega of Japan, and Sega of Japan is like, no, we're already making our own thing. We're already making this Sega CD and Sega 32X. Like, we don't want anything to do with the Silicon Graphics stuff at all.
Score.
So what happened was
Sega CD.
They made this really subpar product that failed and passed on these two amazing things. But I guess the American CEO, he was like so upset by this and felt like he'd wasted Silicon Graphics time so much that he actually passed on their contact between Silicon Graphics and Nintendo.
Really?
So if it weren't for Sega, Nintendo wouldn't have had that connection with Silicon Graphics to end up making the N64 at the same time as the Sega 32X and stuff is coming out.
I'll have to read the book.
It's a good read.
I assume it's like this is legit based on. I mean, they're not just using hearsay and slandering.
No, it's like the guy was actually interviewing all these top people from different companies and gives them special thanks, and there's photos of them and stuff. So
awesome.
It's interesting because you don't know exactly how much of it is accurate just because it's written like a story and not a history textbook. But
right.
It's pretty amazing to see stuff like that. And
I love those stories. I guess one last anecdote from me. It's what is it? February 19th today, recording time. Anyway, and there was an article on Gamma Sutra recently about the rise and fall of the Dreamcast. I don't know if you saw it.
No.
I think the actual article is from like 2009. Like it's a really old article. They just kind of pull. They do that sometimes. It's weird. They pull out a article that's 10 years old and just kind of slap it on the front page. But anyway, it was following the rise and fall of the Dreamcast, and it was like listening to you now talking about kind of Sega CD and all that. It was it's the same story. It's the same thing again. They were talking about what chips to use and how to do this and how to do that, and they were going to go with the 3DFX chip, I guess, which was kind of the preeminent technology at the time, and just really on the horizon. And that was by all measures the right thing to do, apparently. And then they kind of
not if you read this book.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Well, fair enough. But anyway, they bellied up on the idea and went with some somewhat obscure chip made by NEC, and it was kind of again preferring the fellow Japanese company's product and so on and so forth, and that really screwed them in the end because then people didn't know how to develop for this chip and it was complicated and blah blah blah. And they were saying like the sales in the Dreamcast were excellent at first, but then everyone realized they couldn't work with it, so it just tanked and no one really understood the business decisions coming out of Sega Japan. So same deal. It was really interesting recently reading that Final Fantasy VII expose or whatever you want to call it. There was like a massive article I'll link to in the blog post. Oh man, a mini novel, man.
Yeah, it was super interesting reading that and seeing like how they were struggling developing on the N64 and stuff like that. I guess which takes us full circle. Like that was the whole point of. That's why it was so difficult making these games back then. It's just the technology was so expensive and no one knew what they were doing.
Yep. And that it does take us full circle. It's funny they went with the pre-rendered backgrounds with FMV and stuff instead of going with like some sort of 3D approach. And they couldn't even do that on Nintendo 64 just because, data size limits.
Yeah. All right. Well, I thought I guess we haven't really made any headway as to which format's better, but I think that's the best part about the whole games as art conversation is letting everyone decide for themselves how they want to communicate their game.
That's it. I wouldn't even, I don't have an idea specifically in my head of what's better. They're both kind of limiting in different ways, and I'm very much happy to try both.
More. I would love to see more of the pre-rendered stuff being made.
Absolutely.
It's disappointing to see the lack of it.
I think, and reasons, I mean, it's easier, I guess, to go with. I mean, if you load up like any of these engines, like Unreal, you could pretty readily make, like a 3D game. Obviously, your assets would suck if you didn't have a good team working on that or whatever, but to sit down and make a pre-rendered game would be a step out of the convention, right?
Yeah.
Which is why it's seems like a indie thing more now, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So, what's your plan now that you've finished Tactics Advance? Are you got another game lined up?
I've been actually kind of dabbling in various games, just trying to find something to land on. So I played a little bit of FTL. I actually played a little bit of Final Fantasy IV: The After Years.
I hear that's really bad. When I was a kid, I wanted to make a sequel to that game. Like I wanted to make a story about Golbez and company coming back to Earth and having to save it. And
this game is kind of a lesson in why it's better that you didn't get that, I think.
Yeah.
As I played it the whole time, I just wanted to play Final Fantasy IV, and I remember saying Final Fantasy IV is fun. Yeah, I'm playing like the PC port, and it just feels like low production quality, first of all, and it also feels like literally like just there's nothing creative or interesting about it. It's almost like they literally just made more Final Fantasy IV, but with like that kind of like cutesy look that's I don't know, that seems to be more popular with their remakes of older games now or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's okay. They use all the same music, at least so far in what I've played, which is I wouldn't say good at all, but just for me to play this game for like 10 minutes and see what it's all about was kind of fun, I guess. I don't know, I might play FTL. I think I'm going to finish Gargoyle's Quest. I'm like at the very end. It's just kind of harder because my Super Nintendo is on the rocks, and we have... I'm playing the Super Nintendo Zelda with my wife, so I'm afraid to pop the game out because I don't want to erase it. So I'm waiting on her to finish that before I hop back into that game. Although I could pull it out of the Super Game Boy and play it in a Game Boy. But anyway, we'll see what I do. Yeah. I might just put a bunch of time into FTL. I like that game a lot.
It's great. I put almost 70 hours into that game.
Yeah.
Is this your first time playing it?
I don't know how to answer that. I bought it a long time ago and played it for like an hour, and then I played it at friends for like an hour. So it's my first time sitting down and thinking, okay, how can I go through this game and play it. But I'm not like discovering it for the first time.
Yeah.
FTL is very much the kind of game I would always want to make. And again, that goes back to like mechanics, but it's just fun for me. Yeah. It's all meaty, and there's weird things you can do and all kinds of little quirks, and it's just like a strategy-ish real-time game. That's a lot of fun for me. So in all likelihood, that'll be my next game I dump a lot of time into.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you?
So I finished playing Mighty Number 9.
Yep.
Which
thoughts in the end?
I think it gets way more grief than it deserves.
Hype, man. Hype does it to everything.
Yeah. I don't think it's game of the year, but I think it was a solid game. And, cool. If I were to put it in line with all of the other Mega Man games, it wouldn't be my least favorite game.
It'd be above 8.
It would definitely be above 8. I personally would put it above 6 and 5.
I liked 5. I liked 5 a lot. 6,
So I don't know. I thought it was a pretty mediocre Mega Man game. So, unfortunately not as good as 2 and 3 was, but, legitimately I think 2 and 3 were also partially just good just because when they were released.
Yeah, that might be fair.
But yeah, I finished that one, and so I bought the Humble Freedom Bundle.
Yeah, so did I.
Which came with like a billion games.
Yeah, it did.
So there was one. I was like organizing this all into my spreadsheet of like how long does it take to beat each game and stuff. And so I sat down on Friday night.
Yeah.
And found myself with an hour, and I was like, okay, one of these games' time frame looks like I can beat it in an hour, so why not give it a shot, even though I know absolutely nothing about it.
You finish it?
Yeah, you start and finish it in an hour and 6 minutes. And it's a great experience. I wouldn't recommend it at full price, which is like $8 Canadian or something, but as part of this bundle, I'm really happy, and I think it's worth trying.
Cool. Time Frame is what it's called?
Yeah.
It was part of the Freedom Bundle? Because I bought the Freedom Bundle and I don't see it here, unless it was something added later.
So yeah, they actually added a bunch of games later, like 20 games or something. They added after the fact.
I'll go back in and put even more Steam keys in.
Yeah, so I bought like 40 games as that I didn't already own.
Yeah. Sweet. I was actually pretty happy to get The Witness out of that bundle.
Yeah, that was the main reason I got it too. Is I was kind of interested in getting that, but not paying full price for it.
Indeed.
So yeah, Time Frame was pretty good, and so now the one that I'm trying to play at home right now is Gunpoint.
Gunpoint, cool.
Which is pretty cool.
Gunpoint, I put maybe an hour into. I thought that was pretty cool. I like their story, I guess. Like I think it was a GDC talk by the creator. Yeah, and he was just going on about how he discovered emergent gameplay and kind of his approach to making the game. And so I played it, and it's a lot of fun. This is kind of it's the kind of game I like, just this quirky, weird kind of take on side scrollers or whatever, right? So yeah. Cool. Well, let me know what you think. That one's high up on my list. It might be like a game or two away before I get to it. So.
Okay. Well, I'm about a half hour into it right now, so
cool.
Supposedly I'll finish it in another 2.5.
It's that short? Wow. Okay. Well, I just looked and I'm 1 hour in, so I guess you don't have to let me know what you think after all if I'm halfway done it. Although I've unlocked 1 out of 42 things, so I don't know. Your times might be a little off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for this exciting episode of the Vagabond Gamecast.
All right, brother. As always, I'm going to go back to bed.